Advisor in Tokyo. I'm going to be a moderator for today's webinar, so どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。First, I'd like to thank everyone to join this webinar on Saturday morning. EducationUSA Tokyo provides a series of webinars about アメリカ大学進学を考える. And today is the first one featuring studying at liberal arts colleges in the United States. First, I'd like to share my PowerPoint slide. Okay. So in this webinar, we'd like to ask for your cooperation as seen in these PowerPoint slides. Please turn off your microphone and videos during the webinar until the last part. And regarding the questions, please use this Q&A section. So please write down your questions in English. And also this webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded in our YouTube channel later. So thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Now I'd like to introduce three wonderful speakers joining us today from the United States. Miss Remy Abram-Fla from Carleton College, Minnesota, and Miss Louise Arick from Doane University, Nebraska, and Miss Milena Mareba from Wellesley College, Massachusetts. So today's program is here. Each speaker will talk on these topics, including their own institution as well. And after these talks, we have a Q&A session here. And the last part of the webinar, we have virtual room for each institution. After closing this webinar, you can visit these virtual college rooms you like to talk to. And at virtual rooms, you can turn on your microphones and videos. Okay, now I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Remy from Carleton College. So Remy, would you please start your presentation? Thank you.
Ohayou gozaimasu, everyone. I know it is very early in Japan, so thank you for waking up and sharing your morning with us. I'll start my video here, sure. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. If not, please let me know in either the chat box or the Q&A box. So I'm going to talk to you broadly about liberal arts colleges, what we mostly do and what we mostly look for in students. We'll cover these four topics. Really quick disclaimer, liberal arts colleges are all very different. So I want to make sure everyone knows I'm going to cover some general ideas that probably apply, at least in some part, to all three of the colleges represented today. But I don't pretend to know everything about every liberal arts college. So it's important that you do your homework and make sure you know what makes each school you are considering unique. The first thing I do want to talk about is the academic attention, flexibility, and support that you get at liberal arts colleges. For the most part, we work almost exclusively with undergraduate populations, right? That means students who are coming directly from high school into college, right? Rather than students who are in graduate school. I should note there are some liberal arts institutions that do offer graduate programs, right? But for the most part, we are working with students immediately out of high school. This means all of the resources that we have are for you, the undergraduate student. You are not splitting time with professors, with graduate students. You're not missing out on funding dollars. You're not missing out on research opportunities. Everything is for you. We also really prioritize small classes. Very often when you hear about a liberal arts college in America, the word small comes before liberal arts college. And there's a reason for that, right? We believe in the value of personalized attention. We believe in the value of getting to know each other deeply, right? It is, I can guarantee, I don't work at the other colleges, obviously on this call, but I can guarantee the same as it is at Carleton, your professors will get to know you as students very, very well, right? That relationship building is crucial to the work that we do at these small institutions. Interdisciplinary studies is not only required, but encouraged pretty heavily. That was a major change for me, definitely going into Carleton. I was very used to studying exactly one subject at a time in high school, right? I only talked about numbers in my math class, and I only talked about literature in my English class, and I only talked about a very particular subset of American history in my social studies class. And those things never overlapped and they never touched. And in college, it was entirely different, right? I was taking what I was learning in my linguistics class and bringing that to my religion class, right? I would have my professors in sociology ask me about what I had just talked about in my linear algebra class, right? That was really exciting to me, right? The fact that you can find these cross sections between all of these different disciplines and just live in the discussion spaces of those cross sections. If you are someone who is excited about many different academic ideas and you want to see how they crisscross and they overlap and how you can talk about all of these things at the same time, liberal arts is going to be a really good fit for you. It's also really good prep for the world, right? Because no problem exists in a vacuum, right? So learning how to think critically and creatively and collaboratively with your peers is a really good skill set. We focus a lot on supporting students. We can do that because we are small in size, right? Because classes are small, because there's never going to be an overflow of students needing support services or in a particular office, we can actually really give students the time, the care, and the attention that they need. It is not coincidence that these small liberal arts colleges, for the most part, boast really high retention and graduation rates. That is on purpose, right? And that is a direct reflection of the way that we treat students, right? It's a direct reflection of the small size in many ways. Students have access to, I say usually all departments and programs. It's one of the really cool things about liberal arts. For the most part, if you on a whim decide that you want to learn Arabic, you just sign up for the class. If on a whim you want to learn to play an instrument, you just sign up for the class. On a whim you want to learn more about history, you just sign up for it. Again, there are some institutions with specialized programs that you might need to apply for or schedule in advance, right? So there are always exceptions, but in general, your classes are not going to fall only under the umbrella of your major. Regardless of what you're majoring in, you're going to be exposed to a lot of different academic disciplines, which is a pretty cool part about liberal arts. Applicants can, again, usually apply undecided. And in fact, a really large percentage of our students do apply undecided. I actually, the older I get, the more I think there's great value in that. Again, some schools might have particular programs where you need to apply in advance, but for the most part, if you're not sure yet what you want to do, that's okay. You get several years most of the time to just come and explore, right? Many places, many liberal arts colleges don't ask you to even declare your major until the end of your second year, which means you can try many things, right? I started at Carleton as a math major, and by the end of 4 years, I graduated with a degree in Japanese and had never anticipated that would happen, right? But because I had been exposed to it through liberal arts, I ended up becoming really, really excited about this language and about the culture that I was learning about. Finally, you get a lot of really wonderful prep for future schooling. I think in America, there's a lot of focus on sometimes big universities and prestigious universities. You may have heard of like Ivy League institutions, all of which are wonderful. But if you look at the students who fill the seats in graduate level programs, there's a disproportionate number of students from liberal arts colleges. Let me reword that. Students from liberal arts programs are more likely to go on to graduate school, right? There's an emphasis on learning here. There's an emphasis on that lifelong learner aspect of what we do, right? Which means it is not uncommon at all. And you can ask the other two ladies on the call, hey, how many of your students are you sending off to graduate school? I can bet they're going to give you some really high percentages. There's a real community focus. I've mentioned that before. A residential experience is a big part for most liberal arts colleges of the overall experience. Because you're living on campus with your peers, that changes the entire dynamic of what you're doing. You're never more than a few steps from an academic building, from perhaps where your professors are at, having your office hours. All of the academic resources and support systems that you need, and support systems beyond academics, quite frankly, are at your fingertips. Okay, when we talk about creating community, you're going to be building a family with the people that are on campus with you. It does feel very different than perhaps larger universities where most students don't live on campus. But that's something we really emphasize quite a bit. We also really emphasize life beyond the classroom, right? As much as the three of us will talk about the amazing academic opportunities we have and how hard we're going to push you academically, because we will, we expect a lot from our students. There's no liberal arts college that is going to tell you we're just about the academics, right? We're just about the work. We want you to have a life, right? And it's one of the cool things about being on a liberal arts college. There are hundreds of different groups that you can be a part of. And for the most part, you can access all of those groups, right? That's going to be a big change for many students from high school too. I had very little experience in a lot of the different extracurricular activities that I participated in college prior to showing up on that campus, right? I was really exposed to a lot of it once I got there, right? Colleges, liberal arts colleges, are very intentional about breaking down those barriers and creating those opportunities for students, as well as providing you with the funding that you need to participate. There is absolutely an emphasis on diversity. So you'll find that many liberal arts colleges are private, right? This means that there's not a direct correlation, but very often it means we're drawing students from all over the country and in fact, all over the world. It's a pretty noticeable difference between perhaps regional universities, right? This is not to say regional universities aren't getting students from many places, but a larger chunk of their students are probably going to come from a particular radius, right? Within where the school is located. And you look at these liberal arts colleges, we're small enough that we can really focus on building community, right? Being intentional about the diversity that exists on campus. That does not just include diversity of citizenship, race, ethnicity. That includes diversity of thought, experience, identity, any sort of diversity you can think of. Those are things we're looking at, right? We find that you learn more from each other when you're different from each other, right? So it is, again, not coincidence that you'll see maps like this, you'll see lists like this for liberal arts colleges. We want you to know that, yes, this is something we really value and something we are being intentional about building. That community focus really leads to a lot of intentionality behind this work. It also leads, has direct implications for the travel that we do, right? Some of you may have seen different colleges or universities showing up to present in your country or present at your high school. Again, that's a reflection of the kinds of students that we're trying to draw to our schools. One thing that is very important and can be different from some larger universities is the holistic application review process. What that really means is we are looking at you beyond the numbers, right? The numbers tell a very particular story, and they certainly tell an important story, but we know it is not the whole story. There's a reason we ask you to submit a personal statement or a subset of essays in your application. There's a reason many of us ask for a supplement, right? If you fill out the common application or the coalition application, for example, right? There's a reason we ask you, hey, why are you interested in Carleton, for example? Why are you interested in a place like Wellesley, et cetera? We want to get to know who you are, what makes you tick, and what type of fit you will be on our campus, okay? Again, going back to that community emphasis. Yes, we want to know what your GPA is. Yes, we want to know what your, perhaps your TOEFL score is, right? If you are not at an English speaking school. But beyond that, how do you spend your time, right? What gets you really excited, right? What are your passions? I also want to note, because this question comes up a lot, particularly when I chat with students from Japan, we know that your school days look different than the school days of students, certainly in the US, but in other countries, right? And you should know the folks in our offices who read applications from around the world are very well trained, right? We understand that many of you are going to cram school right after a long school day. We understand that. We know that the list of activities you are presenting is going to look different, right, than the list of activities from a student in the United States, for example. Okay, so please keep in mind, we're not looking for you to feel like you need to fill the page. We don't have particular expectations for what you put there. We just want a realistic picture of who you are, right? And if I can give you any advice, put as much of yourself into this application as you possibly can, okay? Because again, that residential focus means that while you're doing, several classes, while you are doing research on the side, while you're doing an internship, you're also going to want to do some really fun things, right? Whether it's baking club or political activism or doing volunteer work, whatever it is, we want you to have access to those things as well, right? We're looking to match up the fit factor beyond just, can you do the work at our institutions? I want to give you a Carleton example, and I pulled an application from a student who applied, I believe 2 years ago, and I took out her information, so you can't see who this is. But this is just a snapshot of this student's grades, right? You can see a mix of 4s and 5s, which is pretty good. The TOEFL score was a 106. For context, Carleton requires at least a score of 100, or I should say strongly recommends. We don't always stick to that 100 number. Very often the scores that we see are a 110 plus for students who are submitting, okay, the TOEFL. The SAT was a 1440. That's about average for Carleton, okay? So this student's academic profile is fine, right? In the context of applications that we see. This student also told us in her application that she was really involved with Tokyo Pride. She was involved with yearbook committee. She did debate, dance, art, community service. She was quite busy outside of class. And I pulled a sampling of the notes that I wrote about this student in the application, because I want you to see what sorts of things we comment on, right? When we actually read these applications, okay? I felt like this student who had not visited yet, she had a really good understanding of Carleton, right? And a lot of times that tells me, okay, this student understands how they will actually fit at our institution, right? The more you can understand about us as colleges, the more you are perhaps accurate in your assessment that you would be a good fit for us, okay? This student struck me as someone who would really enjoy interdisciplinary learning, which, if you remember, is a hallmark of a liberal arts education. And then again, I wrote a bit about this student's personality, right? And how that would be a good fit for Carleton. I think often students worry that all we're looking at is the grades. All we're looking at is the test score. I think students sometimes worry that if they are not admitted to our schools, it's because they should have gotten 2 more points on the TOEFL test, or because they took 1 grade of a 4 when it should have been a 5, or perhaps their essay just wasn't quite perfect enough. And I'll be honest, that is very rarely the case. What is more often the case is that we simply lack the space for all of the amazing, qualified, wonderful students that we want to admit. It's not that you've done something wrong. It's not that we are quibbling over a grade of a 4 that perhaps should have been a 5. That's not going to keep you out of a top institution, right? We simply lack the space to take all the amazing students who apply. And I want you to keep in mind and have an actual picture of what sorts of things we're writing down, right? We're not just looking at what the numbers on the page are. We're looking at how you will fit as a piece of our college puzzle, okay? So hopefully you have a good idea of what liberal arts colleges are in general, what we sort of look for. I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute overview of Carleton and then let someone else take over. So obviously we are a small liberal arts college. We have about 2,000 students on campus. Our students come from all over the world. Again, that is intentional. One thing that makes Carleton pretty different from most other colleges, liberal arts and otherwise, is the fact that we use trimesters, right? Most schools in the United States use semesters where you have 2 longer terms, or quarters where you have 4 shorter terms. We do 3 trimesters. This means classes are quick, right? Our terms are 10 weeks compared to what is often a 12 to 14-week semester. And you only take 3 classes at a time at Carleton, right? Often at semester schools, you're taking 4 classes at a time. So our students do 3 classes 3 times. This means more classes over the course of a year. This means more flexibility. It means it's technically easier to complete multiple majors if you want to, or a major and a minor if you want to. It also makes it easier to fit off-campus studies into your schedule because you have more sort of moving calendar units, right? I understand that if you're coming from Japan, you're essentially studying abroad anyway. So maybe that's something you want to do, perhaps not. But if you have the travel bug, about 75% of our students do go abroad during their time at Carleton. So it is absolutely doable. Our professors are among the best in the world. This is really sort of the only stat that I talk about pretty frequently. There's a lot of sort of college rankings here, and most of which I don't normally pay attention to. But Carleton is very, very consistently gathering this award, right, for having the top undergraduate professors. And as a recipient of a Carleton education, I can absolutely attest to the truth behind that. Their professors are world-class. They are amazing. They're there to work with students. They will care about you beyond just what your grade is. And I found that to be something that was absolutely an integral part of my education. As a student who needed a lot of support, I always felt like I had that at Carleton. Many of our students will go on to get further degrees beyond Carleton, right? They go on to graduate study. Again, that is a hallmark of a liberal arts education, right? We're not going to force you to do that. But when you look at students who are going on to more school after their initial 4 years of an undergraduate education, many of those students get their start at liberal arts colleges. I talked a bit about what students are doing outside of class and how much that is valued at liberal arts colleges. That is no different at Carleton. There are over 200 different clubs, groups, organizations at Carleton. Everybody on campus does something besides academics, right? And most of the activities are open to every single student, and very few of them have a cost, which I really appreciated because I was a very low income student when I was in college. I also want to draw your attention to our OIL office, our Office of Intercultural and International Life. They provide a lot of support and mentoring for international students. You're not required to participate with that office, but I can attest they do some pretty neat programming. I frequented the OIL office quite a bit just because I thought they threw some really great programs together, and I found a lot of support through that office myself. Finally, I do want to mention there are international scholarships available at Carleton. We do meet full financial need. As I mentioned before, we do encourage students to have a TOEFL score of 100 plus. If you opt for the IELTS, we encourage a 7 plus, or we just signed on with Duolingo, so we encourage a score of 120 plus. If you are at a high school that is English-based, you do not need to submit those scores, though you certainly still can if you would like. As of this year, we are test optional. You can still submit an ACT or an SAT if you would like to, but we know that there are challenges certainly around the world with those tests right now. So if you aren't able to get access, we understand that. We do have early decision at Carleton, and in fact, we have 2 early decision rounds. One is in November, one is in January, and then regular decision applications are due in January as well. For those of you who are interested in doing an interview, we do have a ton of amazing alums in Japan. I just met with some of them last year. They were very excited to assist me with an interview event. I found that some students were very reticent to do an interview. They were worried, very nervous about how they might present. And I can't speak for interviews across the board, but I can speak for Carleton's interview process. It is meant to be casual. It is not something that is graded. You are not scored. We have just found that it's much easier to really get to know a student when we get to just chat with them, right? Rather than trying to learn about somebody through a computer screen and through a set of scores, right? So if you are really interested in Carleton, I would encourage you to take advantage of that process. Again, it's not required, but it's just a great way for us to get to know you beyond what we see in your application. So I think my time is up. I'm going to stop sharing here and turn it over to someone else.
All right, so I will share my screen here. And my name is Louisa, so I am the Associate Director of International Programs at Doane University, which of course is a liberal arts university. We are located in the state of Nebraska, which is in the Midwest, like right kind of in the middle of the United States as a whole. So I'm going to go over academic environments and student and campus life at liberal arts institutions. So for academic environments, some of like the obvious things would be different types of classrooms compared to other larger institutions, what the library spaces are like, what study spaces are like, and what kind of academic success and tutoring options are available, which are, you know, usually specific to liberal arts schools, but a lot of schools have similar varied types of things for these. So for classrooms and instructions, the focus at a liberal arts institution is quality over quantity. So as Remy had mentioned, usually liberal arts institutions have a smaller student to faculty ratio. This is true for Doane as well. It's just kind of one of the main perks, in my opinion, in my experience, of a liberal arts institution. It's one of the reasons I personally chose to go to a small liberal arts school as well. And what that also means is that you are on a first name basis with your instructors. So when it comes time to, this is especially important because when it comes time to write your resume or apply for graduate school, you will probably need recommendation letters, and you will have a wealth of people that you can ask who will be able to provide you really strong recommendations. And because they have seen you develop throughout your 4 years, they know how you've progressed, they know who you are as a student, versus being at a larger institution, it could be a lot harder to find someone who knows you at that level and to be very personalized in that recommendation. Another attribute of classrooms and instruction at liberal arts institution is that they're very often discussion based. So it's not a big lecture hall with an instructor or graduate student lecturing you on the topic for the day. Rather, it might be a combination of a presentation, but then also discussion or open for questions at any time, or small group work. Things like that are very common at a liberal arts institution. It also helps with having a creative and engaging environment. So a lot of times it might be more interesting to learn at a liberal arts institution because you are more engaged, because you're in a discussion. You're listening not only to your instructor, but you're also listening and learning from and with your other classmates and peers. And of course, one important thing about any institution is technology, and it's often, it can be hard to keep up with technology, but most institutions do have technology-rich classrooms. That could mean a variety of different things based on the institution or the type of class, whether that's a science class and it's labs, or if it's an English class, or communications class, or business class, and that's PowerPoints and other things like that. So that's kind of a view of like what classrooms and instruction are like. And that said, like the biggest class you have could be maybe 50 students, maybe 100, whereas at a larger institution, it could be upwards of 300 students in one class. So definitely something to think about, but on, you know, regular day, most of your classes are going to be smaller. And then, as Remy also mentioned, I'm just echoing here, academic success and tutoring or like support are really major at liberal arts institutions. It's easy to find and access these resources because they're nearby, like physically nearby. Most institutions are going to offer a variety or combination of these things I've listed here, which involve peer tutoring. So you might have a peer read through your essay and just help you figure out, like, does your idea, is it coming across? Where can you fix that? Or what can you work on? So they can look at that. Individual writing assistance. A lot of institutions, including Doane, have a writing center on campus, which is available to all students. There's also like close monitoring of academic counseling. So like you're always with, like your instructor is always there, so they can see you, they're able to see, okay, my student is maybe struggling in this one area or this one topic. I'm gonna talk to them right after class, or I'm going to invite them to a meeting with me in my office, and we can chat about maybe what their questions are, what they're struggling with, and how can I help my student be the best that they can be and learn the best. So nobody wants anyone to not do well or not enjoy their experience. So everyone is really there for you as a student, whether that's your instructor or other employees on campus. Exam analysis is also another area where a lot of institutions will help. And along with this comes, like, if you are someone who isn't good at test taking, or you just need some extra like assistance with note taking, for example, we have spaces on campus where we can help with that, whether that's providing a quiet space for your exam or extra time for you to take your exam. So that's definitely something that's available to all students. And then of course, preparation for graduate and professional school entry exams or applications. Those are all part of a general like academic success or tutoring program at liberal arts institutions, but also a lot of institutions have, like I said, a variety of these options available to them. And then I did want to mention library services. So obviously it's probably common knowledge that every campus is going to have a library, whether you're a liberal arts institution or not. But I do just want to say that even though liberal arts institutions are small and they're private, they still have a lot of resources for students, whether you're interested in research or you're working on a project and you need to find something. We have, and most institutions will have, databases that they subscribe to or are members of, where students can access journal articles and peer-reviewed research, like just from campus. So it's all online. So it's really easy to access that through our databases. There's also interlibrary loan. So if there is a physical copy of a book that you want, and the specific library that you are at does not have that, you can request an interlibrary loan, which means they will get that book from a partner school, bring that to your campus, and let you check that out from there. It does not cost you anything, so that's another really great resource to utilize at a library, especially on like a smaller campus as well. Libraries often offer specific or like removed areas that are quiet spaces. So if you really want a quiet space for study, libraries are a great place for that. They often will have like smaller rooms that you can reserve or larger rooms that you can reserve. So if you have a group project, you can reserve that room and have that space set aside for you and your project team members to work in that space. And of course we do have, and most schools do have, librarians on staff. So a librarian is the person you can go to when you have questions about, how do I start my research project? What terms do I use? How do I use them? How do I structure a paper? So they're really, really helpful. They're not just there to check books out and make sure everyone's staying quiet. They're a really great resource that wherever you go, definitely keep that in mind, because they are very beneficial. And then I put recording studio on here. That's just something that's unique to Doane, but a lot of schools are going to have these like quirky, unique things they have to offer. So for us, we have this recording studio. Students record podcasts there, the radio station. So you can use that for projects. It's just kind of a fun extra thing that's in a separate space, so it's not disruptive to the actual library, which is nice. So yeah, kind of look for things like that, like what extras are there, because a lot of schools are going to already have these main things, but do they have anything extra that you really want? Like, do you want video recording equipment, and do they have that available to you? And then moving on, so just general study spaces on a small campus is pretty much anywhere. So it could be indoor or outdoor. A lot of times smaller institutions have a lot of like green space where when it's nice out, you'll see little groups of students or individuals who are just studying outside because it's nice and inspiring. Of course, there's a library. And then also your residence hall, or in residence halls, there's often a common area, definitely places students can utilize to study. And then most institutions are going to have some sort of like small cafe area, so you can have that different vibe of studying where it feels like a cafe and not like school. So really you can study anywhere. For me personally, I like to have different environments. I'm not someone who can always just be in the library and that's where I study, but if that's who you are, like that's an option too. So be creative when you are looking for study spaces. There's lots out there that can be offered at all the institutions in the US. So I want to move on quickly to campus life. So it's kind of some main things I picked out that are a part of campus and student life at a liberal arts institution is, first and foremost, most institutions that are small, they're easy to access, which means you are going to be living probably within walking distance to campus, whether that's like in a neighborhood next to campus or actually on campus in a residence hall. I often tell students that you might wake up late because you've missed your alarm and it's 10 minutes to class, but you can still make it on time if you quickly like get on your clothes and walk fast. You don't even have to run because everything's within like 5 to 10 minutes of a walk from your residence hall. So that's kind of nice. I don't recommend oversleeping all the time, but if that happens, you're in luck. Another great thing is peer mentor groups. So a lot of institutions are going to have different variety of like mentor groups, but some of them that might be more specific at a liberal arts institution would be like having an international buddy program. There might be a career mentor available for you, health and wellness mentors, and then school ambassadors. And also just accessing social media groups. So if you have Facebook, you might search your school to see if they have like a Doane 2020 like class Facebook group and ask to join that. And then you can meet, before you even come here, you can meet friends and make friends from that group, knowing that they have all been admitted and decided to go to that institution. Same with like Instagram, or you might even add just like the main institution page. So like, for example, like Doane page, and just see like what even is that school doing, and you'll kind of get an idea of like what the culture is like there. So definitely look at like the different types of peer mentor groups. Some of them might be massive, but usually at a liberal arts institution, it's a lot more tailored and like hand-picked. Like for the international buddies, like I'm the one that pairs everyone together. So I specifically like pick students to go together that I think would be a good match. School spirit is another huge thing. It's big anywhere, but on smaller campuses, it's easier to really feel it kind of infiltrate all of campus. So oftentimes there's going to be like a spirit week. There might even be like every week is a theme with activities. There are often a lot of like kickoff events and also end of term support, whether that's just like a booth with snacks or a dog comes to campus for like pet therapy during finals. There's often fairs throughout the academic year where you can learn about clubs and organizations. You can buy campus gear, which is a huge thing for US institutions. Like if you go to a school, you've got to buy whatever t-shirt or sweatshirt has that school's name or mascot on it. And then of course, mascot and school colors are like the key to school spirit. So I have a picture here of Tony the tiger. Our school colors are orange and black, I think. I don't think it's brown, it's orange and black. So you can see like orange everywhere. And then Tony the tiger is always at sporting events as well. So it's just like a fun environment that everyone is really hyped about. And then another important aspect of campus life is sports, but also health and wellness. So it's not just about like your institutional or intramural sports teams like softball or football, but it's also like, what do you have access to? So you have access usually to your gym facilities for free. Normally that's the case for a liberal arts institution, whereas you might have to pay to be part of one at a larger school. There's often fitness classes available for you. You can take that for credit or no credit, or it could just be recreational. And often schools will have a campus nurse on campus there to, like, if you aren't feeling well, she'll be able to determine if it's just a cold, here are some things for you, and give you a care package, or she can recommend that you go see a doctor. And then when you also have mental health specialists, we call them counselors. So kind of a holistic approach to that as well. And then clubs and organizations are a big part of campus, which again, Remy already kind of mentioned. Oftentimes, this is the wrong information, but clubs such as like Global Involvement Club, which this is that picture here, it's basically Doane's club for international students, but most institutions are going to have that small, tight-knit group for international students, or maybe you want to learn Spanish, so there's Spanish club, or you are interested in biology and veterinarian science, so you join the vet club. So joining club is a really big aspect and pairs really well with your academic side of things. And then, like Remy also already mentioned, access to campus. So living on campus, it's easy to get to your classes, and it's also really safe because you are just kind of staying on campus. You're not having to go out into any neighborhoods or anything like that. So really briefly, specific to Doane, like I said, we are a small, safe community. COVID-19, of course, has impacted our campus. We moved online for the spring, but we are planning to be back on campus this fall with appropriate precautions. Some of our most popular majors are psychology, business, pre-med, pre-law, and education. And of course, we offer all of that one-on-one support that a liberal arts institution is usually known for. So whether that comes from your professor or from a career counselor, or even from just like a nurse, or from me, if you have questions about your visa, you can come to me and talk to me about that, and you know exactly who you're going to. You don't have to tell your story to different people every single time. And then living on campus is required at Doane. So we call ourselves a residential campus. That's because we require students to live on campus, but that also means that you will have a very strong support community near you. It's safe, and you don't have to worry about like finding housing and not getting like scammed by landlords or anything like that. We do offer scholarships to students. So on average, $18,000 per year. You do not need to apply to them. If you are accepted to Doane, you are automatically considered for these scholarships. Doane does not require SAT or ACT scores. They haven't for years. So you don't need to worry about taking that kind of testing. It's hard as it is as an international student to get that, but it's also not indicative of the type of student you are and can be. And then the value that you get from a liberal arts institution and combined with scholarships is something that I think every person, every student and family should think about, what you're getting compared to schools in different areas and how much they can offer for the same price or different prices and what you're getting differently. So for us, we don't require essays. We require our own application, 4 years of academic records, so like your high school transcripts, and then English proficiency scores. TOEFL, IELTS, and Duolingo are all accepted at Doane. And if you want more specific details, I can absolutely share that with you in the virtual breakout rooms that we'll have at the end here. So that was a lot to pack in, but I will pass it on to our next presenter.
Thank you so much, Lisa. All right, I'm sharing my screen. I'd like to start my video if possible. It says I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it. Anyway, I'm gonna get started. And meanwhile, hopefully I'll be able to turn on my video. Ohayo gozaimasu, everyone. My name is Milena Mareva. I am one of the Associate Directors of Admission at Wellesley College, and I coordinate our international admission. Hi, you can see me now. I was very glad to be invited by EducationUSA to present on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is financial aid for international students and any students in general. So I myself was an international student once upon a time. I'm originally from Bulgaria, and I was one of those students who would not be able to afford an education at a place like Wellesley if I had not received very generous financial aid. In fact, that was what determined my decision to enroll at Wellesley. And I remember how confusing it was to sift through all the terminology that was put out there on various websites, and it was hard to do research. So I know that colleges in the US are many, but there are more than 4,000 colleges and universities in the US, and they have different policies in terms of financial aid. Those policies are determined by their budgets as well as by their institutional priorities. But we do share consistent terminology. So I decided that to start our session, I would explain some of the main terms that you're gonna be seeing on colleges' websites and as you research different institutions. First of all, let's talk about need-based versus merit-based financial aid. Some institutions would be basing their financial aid packages on the student's need, which means that they would be looking at your parents' income and financial situation, their assets, and would determine how much of your education your family can contribute toward, and then would meet fully or partially the rest of it. So that's called need-based financial aid. It requires that you submit an additional application to your application for admission to be considered for need aid. And then there's merit aid. And merit aid does not require that you submit an additional application. You are going to be eligible for it based on your strength as an applicant in a particular institution's pool. Then there's need blind admission, right? So it is a process for making admission decisions without considering the need of a student to receive financial aid. In other words, if the institution is making the decision, it will make it solely based on your qualifications without regarding whether or not you might need aid. And then there's the need-aware admission or need-sensitive admission, which would mean that the institution is considering whether or not you are applying for aid. And it actually, usually it is more competitive to get in such a process if you are an applicant for financial aid. Now, those need blind versus need aware processes might vary depending on your citizenship. A lot of institutions who are need blind for their domestic, for their US citizens and green card holders might not be need blind for students who are non-US citizens. So you have to check based on your passport status, which group do you fall in and whether those policies might be differing. It's really, really important. And then there's this critical piece of whether the institution meets 100% of demonstrated or calculated need. So you might, based on your family and assets, end up needing a certain percentage of financial aid. Let's say that the institution's annual cost would be around $70,000. And it is determined that your family can contribute $20,000 of those $70,000. So the rest, $50,000, you're going to need, right? That would be your calculated need. Some institutions would commit to meeting 100% of that calculated need, which would be great, right? But some institutions might only meet it partially. So when you're researching institutions out there, be sure to figure out whether they're committed to meeting 100% of need or partially. And again, whether that differs for students who hold US passports versus non-US passport holders. There are several types of financial aid. The first type, so the cost that we talked about that will be covered partially or fully by financial aid is could be composed of different types of financial aid. First, the favorite for everyone are the grants or scholarships. So college grants are awarded based on need and scholarships based on merit. And they're both free types of financial aid. So free money, you don't have to repay that money when you graduate, as opposed to loans, which is money that you borrow, would be an educational loan that would be issued to you by the institution or by another lender. And then you would be hopefully not needing to repay that loan until you graduate. The terms would vary, the interest rates would vary, but you should, if you're considering an educational loan, you should definitely focus on the ones that you do not need to repay until you graduate from your undergraduate program. And then there's something called work study or student employment. So at every college, there will be an estimate for how much money, in addition to tuition, fees, room and board, you might need to cover things like textbooks or transportation from home and back home, pocket money to be able to enjoy the community outside of the campus. So that money would be an estimate, would be awarding you a work study award, which means that you have the opportunity to have an on-campus job and earn some money to meet that additional cost. That is, again, estimated. It is not a precise cost, and it's also not money that is expected that you would repay back to the institution. It is, you could decide to work more or less hours, fewer hours, as actually most international students work under 20 hours. 20 hours is the maximum per week allowed by the government to work on the campus. And I remember working around 10 to 12 hours per week, which was already pretty intense schedule with the intense academic schedule, of course. And then there are outside scholarships that you could apply for from government or foundations, and you should be researching those. There are some really great opportunities in Japan. I know that there are some government scholarships, and there's scholarships from the Guru Bancroft Foundation, from the Yanai Tadashi Foundation. Your EducationUSA offices might have a list of those, so you could refer to them and research them and be mindful of their deadlines. So of course, to apply for financial aid, there are several types of applications and forms that you will be submitting. They could vary by the institution. The CSS profile, the ISFAA, or the International Student Financial Aid application, or the Certificate of Finances, any of them could be required for non-US citizens. And then for US citizens, typically the FAFSA and CSS profile would be required, or some combination of those. The FAFSA is the federal US aid application. So students who are US passport holders or green card holders qualify for federal aid money from the US government, and that's the application that you need to submit. Documents that you could start preparing if you considered for applying for aid would be your parents' tax statements, and hopefully those will be translated into English, hopefully by an official translation service that you could submit. And all of those materials nowadays are submitted online through secure servers, so you could start compiling those. And also make sure that you plan for some time to complete these forms, because they are kind of lengthy and they do require a lot of pieces of information that you might not know, but your parents would know. So please enlist, to the extent possible, your parents' support so that you could be on top of the applications. And always, 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 when you are an international citizen and you are considering applying for aid, do it while you apply for admission. Most institutions that would be providing financial aid for international students would require that they would want to know that when you apply for admission. So don't wait until you are admitted or you are enrolled, because by then that budget might be spent and there might not be any financial aid available for you. And then this sure is will be generating, this presentation will be generating lots of questions for individual institutions. Financial aid offices tend to be really helpful. So if you have any question about a particular college, be sure to do that. And those are some questions that you might consider asking those offices and individual colleges. Do you meet 100% of need? As I pointed out, that's really, really important. Wellesley, for example, is committed to meeting 100% of need for all of our applicants, no matter of their citizenship, even though we are need sensitive for international citizens, and it is a more competitive admission process for them. So are you need blind, need aware, depending on your citizenship? Do you have any requirements for maintaining aid? Do I need to have a certain GPA to continue to be considered for aid? How do you treat outside scholarships? If I get money from not from the college, but from an outside organization, will it be reducing my scholarship from that college, or not? So there might be different policies. And is there a difference in aid policies for the different admission plans? Some colleges that have early decision plans would have, which are the commitment plans, right? So if you apply early decision, you are admitted, you are going to be enrolling in that institution. Some colleges would be less generous with those applicants. That's certainly not the case for Wellesley. We have the same policies for every admission plan in terms of financial aid, but they do vary out there. So again, be sure to check with the college. And then, does your financial aid travel with you if you go abroad? And a lot of our students are interested in study abroad. So if you are considering this experience and you will have a financial aid package, ask the college whether you'd be allowed to just essentially take your funding with you when you consider abroad programs. So I know that this is a lot to sift through, but again, this session will be recorded and you can review it later once you start the financial aid applications. Now, this is a more exciting topic, I think, in terms of internships and career paths that I'm going to briefly cover. It is one of the distinguishing features of the US college system. It is one of the reasons why the US is the #1 country when it comes to students considering education outside of their home country for undergraduate studies. And it is because we emphasize so strongly the ability for students to practice in the real world what they learn in the classroom. So at all of our institutions, the 3 represented here, but in general at US college campuses, you would see pretty robust internship opportunities. And students are provided with databases that they can look up and can find the opportunity to practice, maybe for the summer, maybe for a few months during the academic year, in the field that they are considering joining after graduation. So let's say you're considering going into finance for the summer. You could be in investment banking, or maybe you could try consulting if you don't quite like investment banking the first year or second year. You could try something different. So students have a lot of great experiences that they could add to their resumes, and then connections that they could build upon once they start applying for real jobs after college, and also once they start applying to graduate programs. Those internship experiences would come really handy. The career education and career advising offices on our campuses also tend to be strong. They provide anything from the introduction on how you should work on your resume and your cover letters, so you could represent yourself as a candidate for these positions in the best way possible, tips with interviews, linking you to potential employers, to our alumni or alumni who are helping you with insights about those fields. Wellesley in particular has tremendous strength in career advising, and boasts some of those great statistics here, with over 90% of our students having an internship, great employability of our students. And it is partly because we generated a few years ago a new model of career advising for a liberal arts institution that helps you make sense and make great use and this powerful, harness the power of your liberal arts education so that you could be working with an advisor from the very first semester at Wellesley. Career advisors are in abundance. We have actually more career advisors per student than any business school in the United States. And as a sophomore, for example, I ended up with an internship at the World Trade Organization in Geneva, which typically does not take interns. And it was thanks to my advisors at Wellesley and my faculty advisors that I found this opportunity, and I actually got funded by Wellesley to do it, which is another component. If you are working at a nonprofit organization or organization that does not pay their interns, funding for internships might come really, really important. So I know we're over time, but I will take 5 minutes to introduce you to Wellesley College, which I mentioned is my alma mater, and it's different from many schools, including the 2 other schools represented today, in that we are a women's college and we focus on educating women who make a difference in the world. We are really famous for it, in fact. Situated on a gorgeous campus of about 500 acres of rolling hills and valleys, which is, it does have 4 seasons, and we do have ways of utilizing each season to enjoy the campus. It is a home away from home, one of the most diverse undergraduate communities in the United States. Although we're a women's college, by any other measure of diversity, we are toward the top of the charts. We have 13% international citizens, with another 5% of US citizens who come from schools outside of the US. So if you have an accent like myself, you will feel right at home at Wellesley. We value different perspectives, different opinions. Actually, for 40% of our students, English is not the first language that they learn at home. And it is a very friendly, welcoming place. So from the very first moment you are there, you're gonna feel the strength of the Wellesley community. And you will start building friendships that will last throughout your lifetime. And you actually, in your lifetime, you become part of the most powerful women's network in the world. So its building starts right on the campus. We are a small liberal arts undergraduate institution, but we pack resources and technology that you typically would find at large research universities. So that's one great reason to consider Wellesley, is the terrific research opportunities, collaborations with your faculty. Because there are no graduate students on campus, faculty are entirely focused on mentoring and advising undergraduates, and also doing collaborations in terms of their research on a variety of projects. We are just outside of Boston, so that allows us to take advantage of a terrific college community, one of the largest in the world. So if you're downtown Boston on a typical day, every 4th person will likely be a college student. So social life is really fun, accessible within 30 minutes to 40 minutes of our campus. We offer transportation to and back. And then we have great collaborations with these 4 institutions listed here in terms of our classes, as well as research opportunities and job recruitment opportunities. MIT and Wellesley share a research program, and also the jobs that are posted at one campus are posted or the other as well. Terrific strength of our academics. You'll find a great variety of courses, as well as that typical approach of the liberal arts and sciences approach that results in a lot of interdisciplinary study. There are about 40% of our campus students who major in more than one area. So they have a concentration in more than one area, and lots of courses and lots of focused attention from your faculty. Faculty are one of the best reasons to look at Wellesley. We can attract some of the best scholars in their fields who are also focused on teaching undergraduates. So by the 2nd week of classes, those faculty would know you by name. You would be able to go for coffee or lunch with them. Actually, my French professor would invite the entire class to dinner at her place. And those professors are really famous, as I mentioned. So my advisor in my international relations major, Professor Craig Murphy, was at the time advisor of the UN Security Council. So those professors bring the information right from the source and offer terrific, terrific mentorship. Wellesley is known as the premier leadership development hub for women. We are very well known for a lot of famous graduates who are leaders in many different fields. Some political leaders are pretty famous, such as the first female Secretary of State in the US, Madeleine Albright, and Hillary Clinton also. So, higher chance of becoming Secretary of State. Also, with great representation of our alums in male-dominated fields and leadership circles. So that's one of the greatest reasons that we are still a women's college, is because there is a gender gap in a lot of places, including leadership circles. And we have a particular leadership training model that we believe is very successful. We look at leadership as practice, and students get to do lots of it on our campus because they are involved in leading the college at every level. So think about the international student orientation. That is run partly by students. Your dorms are run by students. Students are now part of decision-making around any of the planning surrounding the COVID-19 impact. So as a student at Wellesley, you're going to be exposed to a ton of opportunities to practice leadership. And that's what we talk about when we describe the Wellesley effect, that empowerment, the sets of role models that you have among your peers, among our alumni, as well as our faculty, who are more than 60% women, which is a great representation in academia. So with that, I'm going to leave you, and I know we're going to have time to talk later about Wellesley in the breakout room, but I'm eager to be part of addressing your questions now, because I know that you have many. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Milena, Luisa, and Remy, for the great presentations. I think we learned a lot about liberal arts colleges. So now time for questions. So we'd like to open up questions to the participant, and we already have 9 questions. So let's see what we have. Okay. So if you have any other questions, please write down your questions in English now. Okay. Because of the pandemic and liberal arts schools still going to require SAT scores. So can can all of them you to answer by microphone?
So I can take this answer. So there will be great variation as to how colleges work with their requirements. That being said, I think a lot of us are very understanding of the situation and would relax our testing requirements, including Wellesley, with just 2 weeks ago decided that we're going to be test optional for the coming season. So I'm sure that even the colleges that stay, that still require testing, there will be some of them, might be willing to consider your situation if you're unable to get access to a test site for whatever reason. So always, always, always reach out to the admission office if you have any difficulty completing any of the requirements, including testing.
What about other schools?
Sure, I can jump in. Oh, yes, I was going to say the same thing. I think Milena handled it really well. Specifically for Carleton, no, we will not require ACT or SAT.
The same, Doane is the same?
Doane just doesn't, like, it wasn't like a result of the pandemic. We just don't require it, which is just sort of same for like a lot of institutions are moving that way anyway, pandemic or not.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Thank you. For the next question, do you have any update information about the F1 visa for international students in this pandemic? Can anyone answer to this question?
I believe it will depend on so every country is different. It depends on like the embassies and when they open. So keeping an eye on that. And if the US embassy in your country opens for interviews, or if they're doing online interviews, you want to check on that. But schools are still there to support students and provide the documentation that we need to. So for an F1 visa, that would be an I-20. So from an institutional perspective, there is no issue with that side of documentation. It's more if you can get the visa interview and if there's a flight. And if not, I'm sure all of our institutions like mine as well would be willing to work with you, whether that's figuring out a different way of doing classes or deferring admission for a semester. So yeah.
I want to echo that. And so I assume that the question is coming from a student who has currently enrolled in a US institution or a parent of such a student, because we're talking about the upcoming the fall rate and situation right now. Hopefully next year that would be resolved. But if you have any questions about the timing of visa application or concern that you may not be able to get an interview spot at the embassy or the consulate, definitely do get in touch with whoever is responsible for supporting you in the visa process. And there should be a point person already designated in the communication that you've received from the college. Most of us have international student and scholars offices whose primary responsibility in many institutions is to work with that process. So they are keeping their ear to the ground in terms of what are the changes that are happening in individual countries, individual offices, how they might be able to support you. And as Luisa said, if for some reason you may not obtain an interview, then what arrangements can be made so that your transition is as smooth as possible. If you have an offer already and have accepted that offer, we want you on our campus. So we're going to do everything possible to resolve any of those issues.
Okay, thank you. But in the case of Japan, right now the visa section of the U.S. embassies and the U.S. consulate have been closed. So unfortunately, I think we have to wait for, the next situation. Okay, thank you. So the next question is, to all schools, what kind of Japanese students are especially welcome as one of the international students at your school? Which means, what kind of experience and personality do you want a Japanese student to have? Also, what kind of Japanese students are difficult to enter to university? Oh, that's a tough question. So please, anyone can answer?
Sure, I can start, and ladies, feel free to jump in here. I would say that the sort of student that thrives at Carleton, and I would also assume these other fine institutions, is the same as students broadly that thrive at our schools. I don't know that at Carleton we necessarily distinguish between this type of Japanese student and this type of Japanese student. Like, we are looking for learners who are excited to explore and to be challenged by their peers and their professors, regardless of what country you come from, regardless of what your first language is. Like, we're looking for students who are excited to take risks and who are willing to put themselves out on a limb, and who are excited to collaborate with their peers, right? To learn together, to get smarter together, to fall down together, to get back up together. So I don't know that necessarily changes based on where you're coming from. I think students broadly that I have seen be most successful at Carleton are students who are okay jumping into new situations, knowing that they might not nail it the first time. There are going to be mistakes and you might stumble academically or otherwise. But I think students who are willing to put themselves out there and try do pretty well at Carleton.
Okay, thank you, Remy. Because we are running out of time, we'd like to go on to the next questions. To all schools, what is a good teacher recommendation? What do you look for them? But that's another tough question. So anyone can answer? Milena?
Sure, I can try. So teacher recommendations provide us with great information in addition to your transcript or any other academic information that we have in your file. An effective recommendation would Give plenty of examples of who you are as a student in the classroom, in the community. How do you approach your assignments? What do you most enjoy in the learning process? How do you participate in discussions or conversations around academic topics? And how do you relate to your peers? So all of these components would be important to consider as we search for students who would thrive in our classrooms, right? Who would be active in discussions, who would not be afraid to share their perspective, and who would add to the conversation. So, and who would be really, really engaged in their learning process. We offer tremendous academic opportunities, right? With the variety of classes, the academic rigor that we offer. So we like students who would be able to take full advantage of those offerings. And often those council recommendations or the teacher recommendations would paint the picture of who the student is and who might be on our campuses. So a lot of our admission offices actually collaborate with faculty, collaborate with our professors. Sometimes the applications are also read by professors. And as you can imagine, they key in pretty closely on the information provided by their colleagues on the teaching side, on the high school side.
Thank you. Okay, so another question to all schools. If students live on liberal arts college campus, do students have the opportunities to connect with the local community in that region or area?
Yeah, I can answer that. So it's very common for students to have the opportunity presented to them to participate with the community, whether that means bringing the community to the campus or having students go out into the community and do some kind of like service learning or volunteering. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of paying attention sometimes and taking that initiative to go out and take up those opportunities. One fun fact about Doane, I will say, is that we were #1 in our category for student hours of volunteer service this past year. So there's definitely a lot out there. Our community is very small, but students clearly are still very committed to helping and go out and do find those opportunities as well to help out in the community that they live in.
Thank you. Okay, next question. When applying to a financial aid as an international student, CSS profile will be required to all the school? So all of you are requiring CSS profile? Yes and no?
We do require the CSS profile.
Okay, so it depends on the college, right? Okay,
It does depend, yep.
Okay, next question. Would you say that GPA is a big part in applying? As in, if your GPA is low, would they still consider you if your essay is good? That's a FAQ from Japanese students.
Sure. Yeah, I can maybe start with this one. So keep in mind, like, we do holistic admissions, right? So we will never admit a student if we don't believe that you can succeed at our institutions. But your ability to succeed often might not correlate with what your GPA is, right? We understand that there are reasons other than you're not smart enough that grades might not be what you want them to be on your transcript, right? So the short answer is, you can get grades that are imperfect and still be a really exciting applicant to us, right? Because we are looking at your essay, your activities, the personality that comes through your application, what your teachers and counselor are saying. We're looking at a lot of things.
Okay, thank you very much. If we still couldn't move abroad when we enroll next fall due to this pandemic area, are we able to take classes online?
That will be school dependent, and I'm not sure, my school hasn't come out with that information yet. A lot of our schools are probably still in that process of, I mean, some schools are just now informing students that they're going to be online or in person this fall, and the next steps will be what to do if students do need to go online. So that is definitely school dependent.
Okay, thank you. So
I think a lot of schools have said that by July 1st or thereabouts, there will be some concrete decisions and plans that will be announced. So if you are already on our mailing lists, you will likely be receiving that information, or it will be posted pretty clearly so you will know what's happening. The situation, as you know, is developing really fast, and there's all kinds of scenarios being considered, but most institutions have not made firm decisions by now. Within a few weeks, they will.
Thank you very much. Well, which is better to enroll in an abroad university after enrolled at Japanese university, or just enroll in an abroad university? Well, it depends, you know. But what do you think?
Am I understanding the question correctly? Is the question, is it better to start at a Japanese university and then enter one of our universities as a transfer student? Is that the question?
Yes, probably, yeah.
So I can't say whether it's better. It might be a better choice for you as an individual. What I can say is that transfer pools look very different than applicant pools for undergraduate admission for freshmen. Similarly, if you are a student with a non-US citizenship and you are applying for financial aid, you should definitely check in at the schools that you're looking at, because financial aid pools for international students look very different in different application rounds.
Okay, thank you very much. So the last question, if you apply for early decision but do not get much financial aid as expected, would there be a penalty for this? Do you understand that?
So it's a question, if someone is applying early decision, right, and they are accepted and they're getting some financial aid, but it's not as much as they thought they would be getting and is not sufficient in their view. Is that the question?
I think, yeah.
What their options are. I mean, you are not going to be bound to enroll if the financial aid is not fitting your criteria and your family doesn't feel comfortable with it.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we are kind of running out of time. So let's see. We'd like to go on to the next step. So before proceeding to the last part, which is virtual college rooms, I'd like to quickly introduce the next webinar on June 10th. The next webinar, we focus on getting into competitive universities, admission case studies of Stanford University. So please join us again. And if you'd like to talk to EducationUSA advisors, please make an appointment for online advising or drop by our virtual office hours. By the way, EducationUSA centers in Japan are located in 6 cities, which is Sapporo, Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Fukuoka, and Naha, Okinawa. But each center is slightly different in terms of their services, so please contact EducationUSA Advising Center in your region. Okay, now we are ready to go on to the virtual college rooms. So participants should already have